Let's learn how to use arrays in Visual Studio C#. An array is simply a collection of information. It's still stored in a variable, but there's some different things you have to do when working with that variable. The reason I would use an array is if I wanted to store more than one value for something that is common or related. For example, if I wanted to store a test grade for every student in a class, and let's say there were 100 students in that class, I would have to create 100 int variables to store each score. Instead, I could create an array, which is one variable that could hold 100 different slots. Consider it as being like a bank of mailboxes or a row of mailboxes. The whole thing is considered one big mailbox, but each mailbox can be broken into a bunch of little mailboxes. Let's go ahead and create a brand new project in Visual Studio, and I will go ahead and do a Visual Studio C# console application, and you can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to leave mine the default console 3. I'm going to click OK. It's going to create that brand new project for me. And then I'm going to go write a little program that stores a bunch of names into an array. And I'm going to ask the user for how big they want to make that array. Or in other words, how many different names do I want to store? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable. And let's just declare it iNameCount. And it's going to be an int. And then I'm going to create another variable. And I'll just call it iCount. And I'll create an array now. Now, the way you create an array is the first thing you have to do is specify the data type of all of the elements you want to store. In other words, for every little slot or mailbox you're going to create, it holds a data type, like an int or a string or char or double. In this case, we're going to store a bunch of names. So I'm going to say string, square bracket, square bracket. That says I want to make an array. Now I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call mine AS names. I say AS because that's Hungarian notation, and I'm saying it's an array of string. And that's to help readability, that later on in your source code, if you ever see the variable called AS names, you'll know that you're looking or working with an array of string. The next thing we have to do is you have to say new. That's because an array is an object, which is a different type of variable. This says we need to allocate information to store this data structure. And then the last part is we specify the size of how big we want to store. You first specify the data type again, square bracket, square bracket. That says I want to make an array called AS names of type string. Let's go ahead and create the array, and we'll make it 5 long. Now, the one thing about arrays you have to understand is that arrays in C# are zero-based, meaning if I'm going to make 5 elements there, then I actually have to realize that the positions of that array are 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That position is called an index or a subscript. I could assign that array a value by saying AS names square bracket 0 square bracket equals Mickey semicolon. And that would take the string Mickey and put it into the first mailbox, the first element of the array AS names. If I wanted to store another one, AS names square bracket 1 equals Minnie. That now puts an element in the second position of the array. I don't even have to do it in order if I don't want. I could say 4 equals Donald. AS names 3 equals Goofy. And AS names 2 equals Daffy. And so by the time I'm done, the variable AS names has 5 different slots to store data. In the first slot, it stores the string Mickey. The second slot, Minnie. In the third slot, which is position 2 by the subscript, Daffy. In the fourth slot, Goofy. And in the fifth slot, Donald. Now, if I wanted to print all those off, I could do it individually. By using the array name and the position, and that would actually print off Mickey. Or maybe if I wanted to print them all off, I could use a for loop. For I name count equals 0, and as long as I name count is less than the size of the array, which the size is 5, then we'll increment I name count. And then we'll go ahead and print out the name in position. And we're going to concatenate on what position it is in the array by using our counter. And then also concatenate. Notice I put a space there. And then we'll access the element of the array and we'll tell it what position to get. Now, the first time through, I name count is 0 because we set it to 0. 0 is less than 5, so we print off the name in position 0 is, go to the array and go to position 0, which should be Mickey. And then we increment it. So it should do Minnie, and then Daffy, Goofy, and Donald. I'm going to go ahead and wipe out this line so we don't get confused. And then I'm going to add one more statement for our read line to stop the screen so we can pause it. And let's go ahead and run that and see if we can print off all 5 elements of the array. Remember, since it's 5, it's positions 0 through 4. The name in position 0 is Mickey, 1 is Minnie, 2 is Daffy, 3 is Goofy, and Donald is 4. Now, another thing we could do is, since I don't want to hard code, I'm going to get rid of this variable because I never used it. I don't want to hard code the size of the array. In other words, I don't want to have to say, yeah, that's 5, because maybe later on it changes. I could do this instead. AS names dot length. Length is an attribute for that object. In other words, it describes the object. That object is an array, so length says how many elements are there that you have. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It has 5 elements. So that should be a 5, and that would work the same way. Let's run it one more time and see if it works. Mickey, Minnie, Daffy, Goofy, and Donald, and that works. So that's how you create an array. You create it by specifying the data type, an array, the name, new, the data type, and the size. I could create another array with it too. Int AI age equals new int bracket 5. And let's go ahead and let's load up that array from the keyboard. So we could say how old is, and let's go ahead and say AS names bracket I name count. And now let's go and create, we have that variable, let's say AI age bracket I name count equals console read line. And I want to get an int, so I'm going to have to come over here and say convert to int 32. And we'll put everything inside of it. So what this loop now does is I've loaded up all the names manually, and then I say the name in position 0 is Mickey. How old is, go to the array position 0, Mickey. and then we'll go and get data from the keyboard, convert it to an int, and store it to the age array, which are ints. And we do it in position 0 through 5. The next thing I want to do is, let's say I want to print off the whole array again. First thing I want to do, though, is I want to go ahead and print a couple blank lines to clean it up. And then I'm going to use something called the for each. The for each is a special type of loop. It's like the for loop, but we use it with arrays or data that are collections of information. And the array is a collection of information. So I could say for each, and I could specify some value of the array. And so let's go ahead and pull off the age. What type of value is the age? It's an int. So we say int I value. I could call that anything I wanted. In AI age, which is the array. And then I can print off I value. Now the interesting thing is that working with this array, that's the array, and we load up all the data in it. The for loop, the for each, will go to each element or each position of the array, grab the first one, which is an int value, return it back to that variable, and print it off. And then automatically grab the next one, return it, print it off. Next one, return it, print it off, and so forth, until there is no longer any more values to choose. So let's see how this runs. It should prompt us. The name in position 0 is Mickey. How old is Mickey? We'll say 50. Minnie, we'll say Minnie is 49. Daffy, we'll say 43. Goofy, 20. And Donald, 32. And then we print off 50, 49, 43, 20, and 32. So the nice thing about the for each is it's another way to process through the array, just like the for loop does. But this one will go and grab each element, each mailbox of that array one at a time, and return the value back. What you have to make sure you do is whatever you declare this variable name to be, like an int, has to match the data type that's in the array.